Gentlemen, welcome back. In this video today, we are going to talk about energy. How can you have more energy? How can you have more energy that you're readily able to utilize throughout the day to be able to aid you in working more efficiently, working at a higher state of performance so you can get done what you need to get done? And really, this video is all about a key hormone, which I think has maybe become unfairly demonized in the health space. And I understand why, for justifiable reasons, because when this hormone is out of whack, it can very quickly become an enemy when it's not firing properly. But when it's firing properly, it really is so key, so pertinent for energy deployment. And let's get straight into it here. The hormone that I'm talking about is cortisol. Now, depending on how much you know about cortisol, if you know anything at all, you will probably know it is a quote unquote stress hormone. Now, that label is accurate because it is very closely tied to stress. It plays a great role in our stress adaptations, our responses to stress. But when we think about stress, we tend to think of it in a negative connotation. And this is where cortisol has been getting a bad rap. Really, we need to stop thinking about things as good or bad. Some things in some contexts, are beneficial, and in others are detrimental. And really, what I want us to do here is have a bit of a reframe and not think of it just as a stress hormone, but think of it really as an energy deployment hormone. Because when cortisol is firing properly, when it's not just chronically elevated, it is the internal commander for taking energy that we have in our body, mobilizing that, regulating it, using it when we need it, depending on the demands we're faced with in the outside world. And just to kind of quickly sell you on the benefits of cortisol, cortisol is essential for everything from proper circadian rhythm functioning, which means it's essential for optimizing sleep and optimizing the production, release, and pulsation of other hormones, such as testosterone, growth hormone, all these hormones that are essential for our performance on a physical and cognitive level. It's also essential for converting stored glycogen and fat, this energy that's stored up in our body, into glucose and free fatty acids, so they're ready to be utilized for energy expenditure on demand. So we can have all this energy stored up in our body. If our body isn't able to take that energy and actually use it via the mechanisms that it can, then what good is it? Cortisol plays such a key role in our bodies being able to do that. And it's essential as well for optimal androgen expression through maintaining optimal testosterone signaling. So I talk a lot about the relationship between cortisol and testosterone. When cortisol's high, testosterone's low, and vice versa. And that's what I mean. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And really that paints the picture that they're enemies competing against one another, which they can be, especially when cortisol's not firing in the way that it needs to be. But really they should be working together in balance, in homeostasis. And when your cortisol is optimized, it's actually going to be aiding your testosterone optimization, not taking away from it. Sorry. And like I said, we can talk about optimizing cortisol over the long term, but also as well, we get these acute spikes in cortisol when we're faced with external stressors. So if you're training, if you're in the gym, training martial arts, doesn't matter what it is, any kind of physical effort, especially if it's intensely competitive or just intense physically. And as well, like on the business side of things, if you're entering into something that's an intense meeting, an intense negotiation, these are all environments, demands, or external environments that are going to increase our cortisol in a very acute way in that moment. And the reason that cortisol is increasing in that moment is because it's fight or flight. And really, when it's firing properly and when you know how to utilize cortisol properly, it is your peak performance hormone. Because when you get that cortisol increase, we see massive increases in alertness, massive increases in reaction time, cognitive focus. It puts you into that fastest, most adaptive state. It's when you'd be hunting prey or you were being hunted and you needed to execute at your highest level in that moment to survive, to win, to get done what you need to get done. And that ancient mechanism is still there with us today. So the other part of it is, you've got to be able to optimize your cortisol functioning, but you also need to get good at utilizing acute cortisol. So when that cortisol spikes, depending on the external demands that you're facing, in your job, in your work, in day-to-day life. You get that cortisol increase and you don't feel drowned by it, you feel elevated by it. So as I said, the issue with cortisol here is when its release becomes dysregulated, we end up with chronically elevated cortisol. So really we want high cortisol in the morning when we wake up, and then we want it to gradually taper off throughout the day. That's the ideal. The problem is, obviously, if you're an athlete, you're going to train in the evening. If you're an artist of any kind, you'll likely be creating into the night. Your most creative hours may be later into the night, early hours of the morning. When you're an entrepreneur, a corporate killer, you've got to be able to execute around the clock. Long hours are part of the course. So it's all well and good saying you want high cortisol in the morning and low cortisol in the evening. But for you, that's not necessarily going to be possible in the sense that you're going to start off your day in a high cortisol state, high stress state with lots of external stressors around you, and then you're going to taper that off throughout the day. You don't get a choice about that. There are going to be external stressors you have to face later on in the day. Your cortisol is going to increase in response to those, and then you've got to learn how to bring it down after the fact. So let's get into some mechanisms that are actually going to help us do that. And let's start at the beginning. So number one, the first thing that we need to do if we're going to lock in our cortisol functioning is first thing in the morning, get outside, view sunlight. Doesn't matter if the sun's not out, just get outside and consume natural daylight as soon as you wake up. And the most practical, the best protocol to make sure you do this every morning is to get up and walk outside for 10 minutes. It's completely free. Doesn't matter where you are. You can be at home. You can be traveling literally anywhere in the world. In the morning, you're going to be able to get up and walk outside. Costs absolutely nothing. Do that for 10 minutes. Have that scheduled in as the first step of your morning routine if you want to. And that's going to, it's going to do so many things that are beneficial for your health. But the most important thing is it's going to ensure that you actually get that natural light in, and your body is going to start skyrocketing cortisol, first thing in the morning in response to that. Number two and number three are kind of tied in together. We're talking about the nutrients that we need to consume to support the adrenals so they can carry on producing the cortisol that we need to. Because when we talk about burnout, we're actually talking about burnout of the adrenals. And we really need to support the adrenals in order to maintain optimal cortisol functioning over the long term. And the adrenals need enough sodium. So consume sodium upon waking. Just add a pinch of sea salt to a glass of mineral water. It's that simple. We need high sodium. We also need high carb, high vitamin C as well. So when we're talking about breakfast, we want a breakfast, in my opinion, that's high in fruit. There are other ways around this. You can have camu extract if you want to supplement vitamin C. I would recommend that anyway, because really like 1 gram of vitamin C first thing in the morning can be really beneficial, and you'd have to eat so much fruit to get a whole gram of vitamin C from that alone. So you can add whole food vitamin C sources on top of that. But we want a breakfast that contains a lot of fruit. Obviously, you want some protein and stuff in there as well. But when we're talking about cortisol, we've got to make sure we're getting enough carbs, enough vitamin C, and enough sodium, as we just said, early in the morning as part of our breakfast. And having, a big bowl of fruit is a great way to accomplish that. Number 4. So we're kind of going over to the later part of the day now, although you can use these protocols at any part throughout the day. We've got to learn how to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So cortisol, when we get that increase in cortisol, it puts us into a sympathetic state. That sympathetic state is the fight or flight state. And we need to learn how to exit out of that after, that training session, after that intense work period, after that meeting, that negotiation, whatever it is. After that, we need to bring ourselves down, because we don't just want to be riding on this cortisol high all day into the evening. So post evening training or work, do some coherence breathing, some breath work to bring yourself down. Consume some carbs. If you train in the evening, please eat something after that evening training session. Don't think, it doesn't matter how late it is, don't think I'm not going to eat because I don't want to disrupt my sleep by eating something before bed. If you go to sleep in basically a fasted state after you've been training in the evening, especially intense training, your body is staying in that fight or flight basically. I mean, that's maybe a bit less misleading, but think of it that way. Your body's staying in that fight or flight state. It's staying in that high cortisol state throughout the night. You're basically going to bed completely wired. You need to fuel yourself after evening training, even if it's really late at night, to help bring yourself down, help bring you into that parasympathetic nervous system. Other tools as well, Epsom salt baths. Get back from training or back from work, run a warm bath, put some Epsom salts in there. Do something that actually brings you down to a state of peace. Don't just ride on this high, scrolling on your phone, sit in front of the TV and watch Netflix and get all this, consume more blue light. It's just going to heap more cortisol on top of this massive mountain of it that you have already accumulated throughout the day. So do something that genuinely brings you down, gives you some peace, so you're in an optimal state to have a good night's rest. Number 5, again, this ties in with number 4. In the evening, dim the lights or wear blue blockers. We need to minimize light in the 3 hours before bed as much as possible. Invest in a pair of quality blue blockers. The gold standard would be to live in pitch black darkness as soon as it goes dark, and don't consume any light whatsoever other than candlelight, firelight before we go to bed. Most people are not going to do that. It's very difficult to implement such a protocol. It limits you a lot. So we're being realists here. Invest in a good pair of blue blockers. Dim the lights. Don't have the main lights on overhead. Have minimalistic lighting. And in addition to number 4 and number 5, when we're talking about bringing ourselves down into that parasympathetic state, into a low cortisol state before we go to bed, we can add supplementation on top of that. Magnesium is obviously just a fundamental. I do not know one single person on this planet, and I stand by that, that's not an exaggeration, that would not benefit from taking magnesium before bed. Magnesium glycinate is absolutely great. Threonate is great, especially for the brain. Sulfate's good too. Sulfate is often the form of magnesium that's in Epsom salts. And you can add glycine and inositol on that if you want to as well for extra sleep gains. That can be your sleep supplement stack on a fundamental level. Number 7. This is more not in terms of day-to-day, longer term cortisol functioning. This is more about those acute cortisol spikes. Learn how to use these properly. Transmute that stress response, that fight or flight response, into energy. So you're engaging in the fight instead of fleeing from it. Cold plunge in the morning can be an excellent way to practice this. This is going to help that cortisol increase in the morning, and it's going to get used to you feeling your cortisol really skyrocket. You're putting yourself in a life-threatening situation, and you don't want to take on too much of that stress before your body can handle it. Build it up gradually. But when you're in a place where you're well adapted to that, that is such a good way to get your cortisol firing in the morning, and it gets you used to feeling that increase in cortisol, so you don't feel drowned by it, you feel elevated by it, and now you've got the energy that you need to be able to do what you need to do in the morning, or at any point throughout the day for that matter. You need to teach your body to not become overwhelmed by these cortisol increases. You need to learn how to use them. Because cortisol increases, if you're not used to them, they don't feel nice. It makes you flush hot. It makes your heart beat faster. It's very anxiety inducing. But anxiety, nervousness, it's just a different side of the coin to excitement. And when you're in an excited state, that is a peak performance state. And as well, it's important to note that if you fall into the entrepreneur corporate killer bracket, you're likely best off getting your workout in either before work in the morning or at lunch. So we've talked about the realism of, doing things that are going to increase cortisol in the evening. If you're an athlete, you're going to train morning and evening. If you're a full-time athlete, you can't get away from that. You need to do it. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an executive, a man working in the corporate world, you don't need to train in the evening. So move that to lunch or before work. If you do it before work, it's actually going to aid that cortisol increase in the morning, which is what we want. And it's just going to eliminate one of those practices that would otherwise be skyrocketing your cortisol late in the evening. Take that evening workout, put it earlier in the day. Your cortisol is just going to function better all around. Because of that, you're going to have better energy levels. So what's the TLDR here? Cortisol is your internal commander for mobilizing and deploying energy. It primes you for peak performance. So stop being afraid of it and trying to minimize it at all costs, and start learning how to properly lock it in over a 24-hour cycle. And that's it for today. So hopefully you've learned not just what cortisol does, but how you can optimize it so you can really utilize it in the way that our body's intended it to be, so it can actually prime you for peak performance instead of being, a foe that causes you to have low testosterone. If you want to unlock elite performance, in your work, hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, found it useful, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below as well if you have any questions. And if you want to speedrun the process and undergo a complete health and performance transformation, drop me a DM on Instagram at Aaron Wagley Coaching. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And we can talk about what one-to-one coaching might look like for you to help you unlock that elite performance in your work. Hope you found this useful, and see you next week.